Hello, you're watching Geetika Ki Canadian Diary. It seems that in spite of our city's experts and social organizations ringing the alarm bells about homelessness, the situation is becoming more urgent and the solution is elusive. So, what can we do? We all need to become part of that solution. Our guest today is Michael Braithwaite, CEO of Blue Door. I'm wearing blue today, the largest provider of emergency housing in York Region for those who are at risk or are currently experiencing homelessness. Thank you for joining us once again on the podcast, Michael.
Thank you so much for having me. I love your sweater, and not only is it blue, but kind of speaks to the weather we're finding ourselves in right now.
Thank you. So, just putting things in context for our listeners, besides Toronto and Mississauga, Kingston also this month declared food insecurity emergencies. It is wintertime in Canada. Temperatures are dipping down to minus 28 and minus 30 some nights. So in today's episode, I want to run a few scenarios for us listeners and please advise on what is the right thing to do. So our very first scenario, for example, is a homeless person sitting outside the grocery store.
Well, I think what I'm going to ask everyone listening to do when you see someone who's very vulnerable in a state of homelessness or being unhoused is to start with kindness, right? I think often the question you ask is a very good one when we go into the grocery store, that you have a feeling, many people have a feeling of guilt, right? Because you're going in, you're able to purchase food, you're able to eat, you're not hungry, or you won't be hungry for long, where you're thinking of that person not having that. And so I think it starts with, you also have to monitor the situation too. If the person seems like they're not agitated, like they're in kind of the right state of mind, you want to make eye contact. And I think for a lot of people experiencing homelessness, what they'll tell you is, I just want people to know that I'm there, right? When people walk by and it's like I don't exist. Right? Leah Denbach, who takes pictures of people experiencing homelessness with their permission to tell their stories, it takes beautiful photos. She often tells a story of a guy thanking her to say, at least this proves I exist, right? And so it is that, just acknowledging another human being in a tough time. But if you see somebody like that and you can strike up a conversation, you want to see what their needs. They might just need a couple dollars to grab the bus. They might be looking for some food. They might be just trying to stay warm by the doors. I think when you see someone, if you are concerned in the city of Toronto, it's always good to start with 311, calling them, letting them know. They will let Street to Homes know. And then Streets to Homes will most likely be fairly familiar with most people out there. But if not, they'll go within a certain amount of time and visit and chat with and try and build a relationship with that individual to see what supports they could give them to move them forward in their housing journey.
So my second scenario, a homeless person with visibly painful chilblains on feet and hands.
I think that's when, again, if you think it's dire, if you think this person is in need of immediate medical attention, you're going to call 911, right? Mm-hmm. Because you don't want them to suffer. Now, if it's something that you see that is a wound that needs attention the next while, again, 311, Streets to Homes can come and you can relay that information to the operator of 311 saying, well, there's a visible, and they might make that decision to call 911 or dispatch or do that or not, or just send Street to Homes out or send EMS, right? Fortunately, all the decisions don't lie in your hands, which is good. But if you take the time out of your day just to care enough to do that, it's fantastic, right? And even, again, you got to really monitor the situation. If the person is agitated and they're kind of, they have some clarity that, and you can see their state of mental health is all right, and they're saying hello, and you want to engage in that conversation to ask the person what they need and not assume. Do you need some medical help? Are you in pain? What's going on? Do you have a place to sleep tonight? Do you have, why do we call 311 and get you some help? And they might be familiar with or not. Yeah. And sometimes they might say no thanks or whatever, but then it's your choice really, like to say, to call 311. No one's at this point, thankfully, we're not forcing people. We don't have a forced treatment yet. So it's always a choice, right?
It's a tough one though. Scenario number 3, one boards the subway and sees a homeless person with a load of stuff in their shopping cart sleeping on the seats, and the car is jam-packed or rush hour, and the homeless person is visibly unwell.
I think when it's visibly unwell, you're talking like there's state of mental health, or is that, or unwell. I mean, depending on, again, sometimes what we'll see on the subway is someone, it's fairly obvious that their mental health state is not in a good place. Approaching them can be dangerous to themselves and to others around them. So I think in that case, you look for some subway staff to say, I'm really concerned for this person's well-being, right? And it should always start with that too, right? I think sometimes that's where people, because they're in rush hour, they're taking up seats. How can this person do that? Again, they're not thinking logically, or they're trying to survive, right? And be comfortable. We have a gentleman that comes to one of our programs, and he rides the bus all day long because it's a seasonal program. Okay. So they leave at 7 a.m. and they come back later that night. And he says, I ride the bus all day, but during the off season, he has to sleep on those buses. And that's where, when it's not open, and he says it takes him a good month coming into the program to readjust because he's so used to sleeping upright, right? Which is a horrible thing, like for your circulation, et cetera, not able to lie down, right? So always start with empathy, but also make sure that you're not putting yourself in a dangerous situation. So approaching that individual is probably not what you want to do, getting within their personal space, but looking for subway personnel security to say, hey, I'm just concerned for this person's well-being. And they do have some communication pieces on the subway too of what to do when you see that. So just work through their process, and hopefully now if you see the same person day in, day out, that's when you might want to call 311 or speak to your local representative. So your local counselor, your local MPP, and say, I'm really concerned. I'm seeing the same person day in, day out and wondering why, services haven't been offered, because that's, not a dignified way to live.
A homeless person, my last scenario for this episode, a homeless person lying on the sidewalk or public washroom, say a mall.
Yeah, so I want to tell you about a situation that myself and my partner, Sylvia, who works in the sector as well, we were downtown Toronto, and there was someone face first on the sidewalk, and it was just sad to see the stream of people just walking right around the person. And it becomes just so cold to it that they were walking around and not seeing they didn't even know if the person was breathing, like what was going on there. Yeah. And both of us stopped. Now, here's what it's a good example of what do you do? And there's people that stopped and they were just unsure. They're like, okay, well, it looks like they're breathing, but I don't know what to do. I'm a little scared. What you don't do if someone was like that, and sorry, this isn't the scenario, I'll get to that, but if someone was in the washroom or on the side, or don't touch them. Like, don't physically go up and touch them, especially if they're not necessarily conscious. And that's what happened in this case. Someone went up and shook them and said, are you all right? With the best intentions. But that person spun around and almost hit the person because they were shocked, right? They were agitated. But it's more speaking to the person, saying, hey, are you okay? What's going on? Do you need help? That kind of thing. And then, so he came over to us after and we said, yeah, I love your intentions. Thank you for stopping. Here's what we're going to do. And we called 311, told them the location. They said they'd send someone, probably EMS first, because the person, of course, was unconscious or not doing well. We took care of that. But it was disheartening to see just how many people, it was just this stream in a very busy street of people just going around the person on College, right? And sitting in a bathroom or anything like that. You want to look after someone's health, mental health, but you want to make sure that you're in a safe place too and not putting your own personal safety in jeopardy. But when you see that, and I was downtown last week and I saw tents like on the middle of Bay Street, on the sidewalk, and this kind of weather where people freeze in minutes, they freeze, or just in a sleeping bag covering them, right? You always want to try and report that, put pressure on. But, we all, for all these situations you're talking about that are far too common across the city of Toronto and anywhere in Canada, the Ontario Municipalities Association released a report, right, saying 80,000 people right now across Ontario are experiencing homelessness, and that number could grow to 300,000 in the next 10 years if big measures aren't taken. So there's a lot of people without a safe place to call home, right? And the only way that's going to change really is, of course, with, starting with kindness, all of us volunteering, being a part of the solution, being kind, giving when you can, but also making sure housing and deeply affordable housing and supports are top of mind for all levels of government, whether it's your local counselor, because we still see a lot of NIMBYism, from when projects go up, whether it's your provincial, and we'll most likely in the next 6 months have a provincial and federal election. So this is the time when you need to have your voices heard and have candidates really pay attention and pledge action, so everyone has a safe place to call home.
Michael, that was all so important. Thank you for sharing all of that. We take pride in being part of the most multicultural city in the world. I think the stats still say the same thing. We are all coming from different parts of the world. And as I said in our last interview with you and me on the podcast, we all have our own preset notions on variety of topics, including homelessness. So we all may not realize what is not right to do when in Canada. And you were mentioning a few things. I will say that I have to stop myself. I can't help doing it sometimes. Like I'm going for the grocery, and as you said, coming with a cart for the week ahead, I feel guilty of doing that shopping. And I have to pause and think, can I offer something from the cart to this person sitting outside? Can I sit down and make conversation? And then, as you said, sometimes that's not the right thing to do. So clearly there are situations where you should not get into helping mode on your own and maybe think of calling 311 or 911. Is there any situation that pops up in your head that we haven't talked about, and our viewers who are immigrants from other parts of the world, or just like me, they want to kind of get into the situation right away and help, but then take a pause?
It's so interesting you mentioned that. I was talking to a well-traveled gentleman yesterday and talking about how across the world poverty is viewed differently in different parts, where, in some religions too, it is deeply part of that religion to look after your most vulnerable. So they do, right? And your neighbors that might not have as much. So you're deeply rooted in giving back and taking care of people,
Yeah.
and building that. And so, yeah, we see that, throughout. But I think, every situation is a little different too. And I think there's this kind of implied bias that government takes care of these people. Why are they outside? Like they have choice. Why would they choose to live outside him? It's never really a choice. Now, sometimes, believe it or not, people will see outdoors as a better choice than a shelter, just because they may have had a bad experience there, may not have had an experience at all, or they're just not comfortable in a smaller or shared space, or maybe it is a religious piece, or it's co-ed, or it's all these different things, right? But it's lack of choices. No one would ever have their first choice living in a tent or a sleeping bag, especially this time of year, or in the grueling hot summer days or anything like that. Never, right?
Yeah.
But for them, they feel safer. And the other part too that people have to understand is, why would people live in encampments too? It's aside from four walls and a roof or any kind of structure, is that we all crave community, right? So we've seen it before, and I talk about, like, we've been part of the problem where we're like, hey, guess what? We found you a wonderful apartment on your own. We put you in there, and then a month later, you're back at the shelter. Well, why is that? Well, when that person was at the shelter, they had 25 friends, they had staff who acknowledged them, cared, they had family, they had community, and they missed that. So now we've learned, and so when we place people in housing, part of the housing journey and in Housing First is really wrapping those supports, where here's your local library, here's some groups, let's get you involved. We have aftercare workers who go and visit, check in on you, or you're cooking your meals, and that kind of stuff. So let's not, assume. The other thing too is that, the choice to give, like you said, groceries or money, or I think we overthink it. People are like, I can't give that person money because what if they spend it on drugs or alcohol? Now, at the end of the day, I think if you're kind of altruistic when you give, that's not up to you, right? Like, if what they do with that money, you either choose to give or not. They may not run and, get housing or do something, but this is a person that's trying to survive. So don't overthink that. What am I enabling them to? Not really. It's not enough money to, but it's getting them by. And I remember even myself once, a gentleman, I was at a gas station. He said, "Buy me a sandwich." And I said, "Yeah, no problem." So I bought him a sandwich. He said, "Buy me another." And I couldn't, so I got to run. But at first I was a little like, wow, I can't believe you didn't even acknowledge I bought him a sandwich. He wanted, well, of course, my feelings are really not top of mind for him. It's survival. If I can get two sandwiches out of him, great. If I get one, well, at least I asked for two and nothing lost. I got one. I got to survive till the next day, right? So, it's really always kind of checking that your assumptions of people and understanding that. And the paths into homelessness too. I mean, sadly, our premier a while back said, people have to get off their butts and go get a job. And then he was labeling like that's really making a big assumption is that there's so many different paths into homelessness, many of them from family breakdown, divorce, abuse, violence in the household kind of thing, from addiction to mental health crisis to just poverty and affordability crisis, right? We've got a record number of people using food banks, 1 in 10 in the GTA. 1 in 10 in the GTA are using a food bank, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no housing bank. So once you're done paying for housing, you have nothing left for food. In fact, I think they said, a large number of people using food banks now will say they have $5 left over after paying for housing, or $6, and many nothing. Right? They're spending where you're supposed to, like you're supposed to spend about 30% of household income on housing. Most people are spending 90 to 100% because the cost of housing is just skyrocketed, right?
Wish I had more time and I could talk in length about these topics and we could kind of brainstorm what should be happening. Thank you so much for your time and information, Michael. Always learn so much from you. I'm hoping that myself and our listeners know a lot more about becoming a part of the solution that is overwhelmingly on everyone's mind. Stay well and warm, and we really appreciate the work you and your team does each and every day. Thanks again.
Thank you.